It started like any other quiet morning. I was sipping my coffee on the porch, watching the sun paint the neighborhood in soft golden light, thinking about nothing more than how peaceful life had finally become. But that peace, it was about to shatter in a way I never could have imagined. A sudden snap of a clipboard on the sidewalk made my heart jump. I looked up, startled, and there she was, HOA Karen. Not just any HOA member, but the HOA member whose reputation for intimidation and overreach had everyone whispering behind closed doors. Her sharp eyes locked onto me, and her lips twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something in the air changed immediately, like a storm brewing on a clear day. Karen strode across the street with the confidence of someone who thought rules were made for others, never for herself. Her heels clicked against the pavement like warning shots. She waved the clipboard in my direction. "You're violating community standards," she declared, her voice dripping with authority. "And if this continues, there will be consequences." My first instinct was to stay calm. I've dealt with difficult neighbors before, but this was different. There was a coldness behind her words, a sense that she wasn't just targeting me, she was aiming to control everything in her path. Her gaze flicked to my kids playing in the yard, and suddenly it wasn't just a matter of petty fines. It became personal. I tried reasoning with her, explaining that I was on my own property, minding my own business, but Karen wasn't interested in explanations. Each word I spoke seemed to fuel her aggression. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a threatening whisper. "You better watch yourself. I know people, and I don't take kindly to resistance." It hit me in that moment. This wasn't just about a clipboard or a rule. This was about intimidation, about fear, about testing boundaries in a way that could destroy lives if left unchecked. And she had no idea who she was messing with. I felt a surge of protectiveness for my family, a sudden undeniable clarity that I would not let her dictate the comfort and safety of my home. My mind raced with questions. How far would she go? What was she capable of? And most importantly, how could I defend myself and my family without escalating things into something uncontrollable? That's when I realized this was only the beginning. This encounter, seemingly small on the surface, would trigger a chain of events that would turn our quiet neighborhood upside down. Every decision, every step I took from that moment forward would matter, more than I could have ever anticipated. The next day, I thought maybe I had imagined the intensity of the previous encounter. Perhaps Karen was just an overzealous neighbor, a minor annoyance that could be tolerated. I was wrong, terribly wrong. By mid-morning, our mailbox had a new addition, an official-looking notice stamped with bold letters and her signature. Violation of HOA rules. My stomach sank as I read the demands, fines, mandatory compliance, and warnings of further action if I didn't correct my so-called offenses. But the real shock wasn't the paperwork. It was the timing and the audacity. The notice cited things that didn't even exist. A plant that was supposedly too tall, a paint color that was allegedly non-compliant, even a lawn ornament that violated community aesthetic standards. Stared at the document in disbelief. How could someone fabricate rules with such confidence? Targeting my family like this? Later that afternoon, as I tried to gather my thoughts, I noticed her car parked across the street. Karen was watching. Not just casually observing, but stalking, taking notes, her eyes following every move of my children as they played. My heart raced. Fear wasn't just a reaction. It was now a tangible, almost physical presence in our home. I knew I had to confront the situation, but with caution. Any wrong move could escalate things further. I took a deep breath and stepped outside, determined to establish boundaries. Karen didn't waste a second. She approached with that same cold, calculated smile, clipboard in hand like a weapon. "I see you received my notice," she said. "You'll want to correct these issues immediately. Failure to comply could result in consequences that will affect your entire family." Her words weren't just threats. They were promises of chaos. A shiver ran down my spine, but I refused to show fear. I looked her in the eye and said calmly, "You have no right to intimidate my family. This ends here." Karen laughed, sharp and grating. "Oh, it's only just beginning. You'll learn soon enough that rules are rules, and I enforce them." With that, she turned and left, but the sense of menace lingered. My mind raced with what she could do next. This was no longer about neighborhood rules. It was about power, control, and testing limits. I realized then that I couldn't just react. I needed a plan, research, documentation, witnesses. Every tool had to be prepared because this Karen wasn't going to stop until she got what she wanted, or until someone stood their ground. And I wasn't about to let her hurt my family without a fight. Little did I know, the next confrontation would push boundaries far beyond anything I had anticipated. Karen's audacity was about to escalate from mere threats to actions that would shock the entire neighborhood. A week passed, and the unease in our neighborhood had grown thicker. Every rustle of leaves, every unfamiliar car on the street set my nerves on edge. Karen had made it clear she wasn't just going to let this go. Her presence was suffocating, her threats lingering in every interaction. And then it happened. It started with a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. When I opened it, there she was again, holding the same clipboard, eyes sharp, a predatory smile plastered across her face. "I've received reports that your family isn't complying," she said, stepping closer than any neighbor should ever dare. "And I don't take kindly to defiance." I swallowed my fear and blocked her path with a calmness I didn't entirely feel. "Karen, this stops now. We are on our own property, living our lives. Any further harassment will be documented and reported." Her laughter was low and cold, echoing down the hallway. "Document all you want. Words don't stop action. I suggest you take this seriously. You have no idea what I'm capable of." It was in that instant that I realized this wasn't about rules or fines anymore. Karen's threats were escalating into intimidation aimed at controlling us, my family. I could feel the weight of danger pressing in, but I refused to let panic dictate my actions. Later that day, my fears were confirmed. I discovered a series of notes slipped under our door, anonymous warnings, veiled threats, and even insinuations that she had been watching my children. Every line screamed control, a meticulous effort to unsettle us. The reality hit hard. Karen had crossed every boundary, transforming from an annoying neighbor into a direct threat to my family's safety. I knew then that it was time to act decisively. I documented everything, taking photos, keeping every note, and recording every interaction. I contacted the HOA board, law enforcement, and legal counsel. The situation was no longer something I could ignore. It had become a full-blown confrontation between a tyrant who thought she could intimidate and a family who refused to bow. That night, I sat with my children, explaining in age-appropriate terms that we might face challenges, but that we would stand strong together. Their trust and sense of security became my anchor, reminding me why I couldn't let fear win. As the days went by, Karen's attempts to assert dominance became bolder, blocking driveways, issuing more fabricated fines, and even attempting to rally other neighbors against us. But with each move, she only revealed her desperation and lack of foresight. Every threat was a clue to her weakness. Every overstep a mistake she didn't even realize she was making. The storm was no longer a threat. It was here. And now it was about to turn against her. The day of reckoning arrived like a storm no one could ignore. Karen, emboldened by her previous intimidation, had crossed every line possible. I knew that if I didn't act decisively, her threats could escalate into something dangerous. But this time I wasn't alone. I had documented every move, every threat, every unfair action, and I was prepared to show the truth. It started with a phone call to the HOA board, detailing each incident with timestamps, photos, and even video evidence. Every fabricated fine, every note slipped under our door, every attempt to block our driveway, everything was laid bare. To my surprise, some of the board members were unaware of the full extent of Karen's actions. They listened, shocked, realizing that her behavior had gone far beyond the bounds of authority. The next step was law enforcement. When the police arrived, I presented the documentation calmly, letting the evidence speak louder than any argument. Karen, naturally, attempted to deny everything, but the facts were undeniable. Her threats, her harassment, and her relentless overreach had been meticulously recorded. There was no wiggle room, no room for manipulation. Her power was gone. Facing the reality of exposure, Karen tried one last intimidation tactic. She approached us on the street, voice raised, attempting to assert control. But this time, her words had no effect. I stood firm, surrounded by neighbors who had witnessed her actions firsthand. Her veneer of authority cracked, and in that moment it became clear. The woman who had thought she could terrorize a family had overplayed her hand. Legal action and HOA intervention followed swiftly. The fines were dismissed, warnings retracted, and Karen faced restrictions on her ability to enforce rules unilaterally. Her attempts to isolate and intimidate us crumbled under the weight of accountability. It was a relief, yes, but also a profound lesson in standing up for what's right. More than the legal victory, it was about reclaiming our sense of safety and dignity. My family could finally feel secure again in our own home. Karen's threats, once looming like a shadow over our lives, had lost their power. The intimidation that had felt so overwhelming now seemed small and futile in hindsight. As we stood together on our porch that evening, I realized the most important lesson of all. Fear has no authority unless you let it. Karen had underestimated the resilience, courage, and unity of a family determined to protect itself. She thought she could dictate our lives, but in the end, it was her actions that defined her, and it was her downfall. Standing firm, documenting the truth, and refusing to be intimidated had turned the tables completely. And now, the neighborhood knew, no one has the right to threaten a family, and power without accountability always collapses. The storm had passed, and we were stronger for it. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more wild HOA Karen encounters, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what you would do in this situation, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next unbelievable story.